Well, it is a pleasure today to be speaking with Sharon Rocky Roggio, the writer-director of 1946, The Mistranslation That Shifted Culture, which I love that title, by the way. I always love it. I say a long title, but I think it's such a great title and so specific. Thank you so much for the time for chatting with me. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Steve, thank you for having me. I do appreciate it. I would like to acknowledge, though, that I did not write the film. We
Oh,
have two lovely writers. Jenna Serbu is our writer, and then Jill Woodward helped with the writing as well, and she's our editor. And then I produced the movie, so I was the producer director. But the three of us did structure the film and did a really great job balancing off each other with our different backgrounds and really addressing the tone that we wanted to deliver. So anyway, yeah, we have to give recognition to the lovely Jenna and Jill.
absolutely, absolutely. I apologize for that, but
No worries. Hey, we just met and I know you just watched the film, and I'm so grateful that you watched the film and then you're giving me a chance to be able to share it with your audience. So thank you.
I absolutely love the film. I thought it
Good.
was
Oh, thank
phenomenal.
you.
Yeah, I really truly did. I grew up in a conservative evangelical environment,
Yeah.
and I think the film is just fantastic. Asks some incredible questions. I know that so much of this is rooted in your own story, but it takes a lot of courage to put your. I mean, this is a lot about you and your dad, and I was just wondering for you, what was it like bringing that relationship to the screen and sharing that with the world, really?
Sure, bringing the relationship with me and my dad on camera, as you can imagine, was very challenging as we wildly disagree on our ideologies and our theology, actually. But for us, for me, Jenna and Jill, in writing the movie and structuring the film and them writing the film, we really wanted to contextualize how this mistranslation plays out in our society. So we were looking for the Rocky Sal or the Sharon Sal storyline, but we didn't really know that it would be my story. Jill was actually against me being the one of the lead subjects in the film because I'm the director of the movie. Now I'm in the movie. It just isn't something that is celebrated, and or structurally, she's very structure based. But once my dad showed up, it just came together and we all listened to that storyline, and he's such a great representation of what we and our story in general. So I'm just so grateful that he was open to trusting us to share his authentic voice and to be an example of how to disagree and love your child and things of that nature. But then also with me, as you were asking, what was it like, and putting myself through some painful situations again, but being able to show that realness that we're not going to change everybody's minds. This isn't a Hollywood ending, but it's a hopeful ending.
Yeah.
And there's hope at the end, and we hug at the end, and we're all humans at the end. And maybe we got this wrong. And if we can just look at the great academics that are in the film and the prominent scholars that are in the film, and then even someone with my dad's point of view, and balance that together, I believe that we have a opportunity for a broad conversation that will hopefully extend globally. So that was kind of what it was like, but then also the goal and the motivation behind what we did.
Yeah, yeah. I can't even imagine that because I mean, this is it's such an honest conversations taking place, and it's just so compelling and you hope. I love that you use the word hope because as a viewer, I'm hoping as I watch the film for these conversations to break through. And I was wondering, from your perspective, one of the things that really impressed me about this film is its commitment to delving into proper exegesis of these passages. As somebody who grew up in the church, and uh, I'm like, man, this is genuine. These are genuinely, researched arguments, not just, hey, let's talk about it. It's really well done. And I was wondering from your perspective, why is it you think that people are so fearful to change their understanding of scripture? Because that's the pushback here. It's like, well, you can't say that, but
Right.
you've done the work. The work is there.
Right. Well, we wanted to make sure, first of all, that we weren't attacking the Bible or God or anyone, vilifying anyone, and understanding that our oppressors are usually our loved ones. So how do we look at what's really going on in the passages? But for someone like my dad, who's never going to change his mind, imagine all your life saying one thing over and over and over again, and generationally. This isn't just in one generation. And so it's hard for people to admit that they could be wrong. And another reason why, again, we wanted to hit those tones of leading with empathy, compassion, love, academics, and relationship is to not pull the rug out from underneath anyone. Allow people room and grace in this conversation to take a step back and just be like, whoa, and really just take a step back from whatever reality you come from and think about the other perspective and think about how we got our English Bibles that we have today. And so that was really, I'm so glad that you recognize the effort in that, because that was in the front of our minds. And now for me, I never imagined that I would make a documentary about the Bible. And for Jenna and Jill, our, writer and editor, they don't come from this world of being in religious oppression or growing up in the church. And so maybe secondhand through Jenna understands the experience. Jill's a little bit more far removed, but we all wanted to make sure that we were making something different that was for everyone, that wasn't attacking, that's not propaganda, that's not angry, and threatening. We wanted to be as non-threatening and honest as possible. Kathy and Ed are real Christians, and I am a real Christian. We grew up in the church. We've been around these things. These things are real stories. And so I appreciate people taking the time to see it through this perspective. And also to understand, another thing I wanted to amplify is where the harm comes from a lot of different places in the translations. But right now in our culture, it's primarily coming from the evangelical community and some of these communities that are more fundamentalist. And so, we only have 90 minutes in the film, but there are other things that we can discuss. And we're looking forward to doing that through our impact campaign, which would be outreach to the community, including Kathy Bulldog's book and a book that we're creating with 1946 to break down additional questions that we couldn't answer in the film, to look at some other themes that are big, like one man, one woman, the biblical view on marriage, etc. What's a sodomite? What's the origin? How did it become used as a weapon? When did it change over time? And those are really important conversations to have. So I do encourage people to give us a chance and go on this journey and come out on the other side wanting to know more and wanting to learn more. And hopefully we can do better as a community in our society,
Yeah, I certainly see that. And there's a genuine tone of this film. Like you said, you didn't want to come out guns blazing and let's start with a conversation. And I absolutely love that. And one of the things that is brought up in this film, and I don't think I'd heard it put this way before, but I thought it was just such a simple term and so accurate, was the idea of sacred weapon. And that breaks my heart. I've seen scripture used as sacred weapons. And I was just wondering, based on what your experiences and the stories that you're able to tell in this film, can you talk about the nature of a sacred weapon here and how it has affected the whole LGBTQ community?
Sure. So I always like to address the fact that the LGBTQ community, and now primarily the T community, are the next in line of a long list of others that the church and other people have done to marginalized communities. We do this as a people group to other people groups. And when people groups use ancient texts like the Bible to then proof text their point or their bigotry or their misunderstanding or their generational influence, that's what we're really dealing with here. So, yeah.
And it's happened in so many different eras with so many different people groups in so many different
Yeah.
ways.
And women and children and, animals even in the Bible, you see, and that's a really interesting point when you look at the Levitical passages. The 1822 points the, abuse on the penetrator, but in 2013, they're both getting the death penalty. But if you look at the language, so there's the penetrator and the penetrated, man sleeping with male. It's the same when the abusive man who is doing the penetrating is doing that act to an animal. And both in that Levitical 20 section, both of the victims are put to death. And that was a purging of the land. That was a purging of all things that are not clean. And so even innocent victims would be slaughtered. So we have to really look at these things and address them with honesty and be hopefully bold to go and recognize new information and have these conversations. Now, one other thing I'd like to say with the example of my dad and not being able to change his mind, we do feel strongly enough that we've put together a wonderful piece that hopefully there will be enough people that will move us. So at the end of the day, regardless of what you believe and how you interact, hopefully you interact with love with your loved ones. It needs to stay out of our public policy. We can come together as a people group and stop doing this marginalization and stop using ancient texts as a weapon and keep it out of our laws of the land and come together on a moral compass together as a people group, with other religious communities that we live around. And all of the religions of the world follow the principle of love. So I hope that we can just start from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I know I rambled off a little bit off the question there, but
No.
there's so many things to consider when doing this really interesting, challenging work, as you can imagine, trying to balance these themes and be as diplomatic, but also, separating yourself from it and really being objective as possible. And it was challenging, but it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I'm really proud of it. And I'm just so grateful again for this chance to share it with your audience.
One of the things I thought I loved about this film, I can't, forgive me, the gentleman at the end, the older gentleman who was being interviewed on stage, I cannot think of his name.
David Fearon.
That's it.
Yes, Reverend David.
Yes, yes. He talks about the call to ministry. And I was wondering from your perspective, what do you think maybe the most important ministry is that the church, the more conservative churches need to offer the LGBTQ community, and maybe the LGBTQ community needs to help minister to the more conservative churches?
Sure. I would say that for a conservative church, the first thing that they need to do is make sure that it's publicly known that where they stand. Because there's a lot of these churches, as we see in the movie, that are in the middle and they're hiding those things, and it's very deceiving. It's like the bait and switch. So they could look they're welcoming, but they're not equal. And so they need to be very upfront about that. And so honesty on both sides, I think, would be probably the key. From there, then we have a decision if we want to be in that community or not. And then I do know people who stay in conservative spaces, who are in spaces that are not affirming. Maybe there's a couple people or there's a couple queer kids in the congregation, and they're starting these conversations, but it's going to take a very long time. I would say start with 1946, The Mistranslation That Shifted Culture. Watch that movie. But besides us, and besides even me, I'm very new in this conversation, and there are a ton of people who have done the work well before me, and really great scholarly work, but also human work and mothers work like Free Mom Hugs and various other organizations where they have conferences and you can meet up and talk with other people. There's one going on in Georgia that is for a very conservative viewpoint. And it's at Andy Stanley's church in Georgia, which is one of the largest churches in North America. And so it's baby steps. It's being open to listening and hearing other perspectives, and maybe meeting a gay person, for a conservative. And so for someone who is on the other side, again, just following up with that, making sure that you're in a safe place, you're in a healthy place, you know your boundaries, you know when to say no. And if you are okay with being that space, go for it. But some people are not ready to be in that space. There's too much damage. And that's okay too. And that's one of the interesting things I've had to learn in making this movie. When I first got attacked by an LGBTQ person online, most of the stuff is cyberbullying. And it was a person that wanted nothing to do with our movie. I was so angry. And it's happened a couple times that we were even doing something like this and working as a queer person in a faith space. And so listening during that process on social media was very vital as well, and making sure that we're understanding as much as possible. So yeah, be in a good place and be open to understanding.
You know, I've worked with several teens um, who have said to me, you know, I don't feel safe at the church in general. And so they've even made comments like, I have to walk away from my faith entirely. And I'll say to them, I'll say, really? Why? And it's because of sacred weapons. It's because of sacred weapons and not safe spaces. And it's not, when I say why, I don't mean why as in I don't know, but why is in, you know, the what does it mean can you still have a faith if the church has been toxic? And that's one of the things I've seen is the church toxicity of the church has ruined that, as if that this is the key issue of all the issues. And it's so heartbreaking to see people have their faith broken from them because people are not willing to have conversation. Let's put it that way. It is honestly, from your perspective, you know, and just as we start to wrap up, what do you hope people take away from 1946?
Sure. So the biggest takeaway would be being open to new information, and also being for us too, one of the important key things is the thing that separates our movie from other great movies who have dealt with homophobia in the church is the understanding of where we got our English Bibles that we have today. You know, there are 400 plus English Bibles. Why do we have that many Bibles? Shouldn't we just have one? You know, and then there's the conservative translations, there's the footnotes, what's going on in them. And we try to express the difference there. So what Bible are you reading is even important too. And so answering those kinds of questions for someone who is a firm Bible believer, or somebody who's a person of faith, or in between, or deconstructing, or whatever it is, you know, we're never taught that. And you grew up in the church, we never even thought about it. You know, you had your King James probably. And I started out with a King James and we went to NIV. Now they're at ESV, you know, and so it's just an interesting perspective, and it's a humbling perspective. And so that would be an important takeaway. And then the second two most important things would be the laws of the land, making sure that we can have pure separation of church and state. But then how are we also treating each other? How are we dealing with the other? And, you know, hopefully we can create some humility. And I want to change the world. Steve, I'm going to be honest with you, but hopefully people will come with us on this journey.
I really hope so, and I really am thankful for your time. Rocky, thank you so much. It's wonderful to chat with you, and I wish you the best for the film and what comes next.
So next, well, we're looking for distribution, and then once we get distribution, whether that's self-distribution or we're fortunate enough to get on a public broadcast type network, we want to incorporate our impact and educational plan and the workbook that then will encourage more conversation. And so the work's not done. And we want to make sure that it's available in educational institutions, at conferences, at churches, community centers. And then from there, Jenna and I are working on a couple other movies. Maybe we'll wait for that for another time, spoiler alert. But if anybody did want to find us, you can find us at 1946themovieinfo@gmail.com, and send us an email if you wanted to know about 1946 or you wanted to ask us a question in general about the other two new documentaries, one of them dealing with Christian nationalism and the dangers of how power structures use the Bible to ultimately destroy our democracy. But again, keeping those tones with the 1946, understanding that it's my parents watching Fox News, and believing things that might not be necessarily healthy for our society or true. And so we want to address those things with humility as well. So,
And-
nothing light. We're just,
Yeah. It's another sacred weapon.
Exactly. It's another sacred weapon. But Jenna and I are super proud to be doing that, and some other things that we're doing, and super honored that the film is being received so well by audiences. We have a ton of audience awards all over, and have shown the film so far all over the world. And so I can't wait to see the ripple effect as it continues. And we're going to stay on this path and see how we can start breaking down systematic oppression that is really holding us all back as a people group.
I appreciate that. Honestly, Rocky, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. I really appreciate it.